The 2024 NBA playoffs are officially set, and the very first matchup that caught my eye in the Western Conference was Suns Timberwolves. These feel like two teams that had dramatically different regular seasons. Minnesota was in contention for the 1 seed the entire season. They exceeded expectations every step of the way. They have the best defense in the league and a team that looked like a legitimate threat to make the conference finals and maybe even the finals, given how well they matched up against Denver in last year's postseason. Whereas Phoenix, high expectations before the season, tons of talent, but certainly didn't meet those expectations based off their regular season record. They finished the year as the 6th seed, despite one of the most expensive rosters in the league, despite continually going all in, trading all these future firsts. But now they meet in the postseason in a matchup that I think is absolutely fascinating. Number one here for this series, the number one thing that I'm watching, that I'm paying attention to, is the shot profile for Phoenix, because the way that Minnesota guards, above all else, they want to stop threes and they want to force you to get all the way to the rim so that Rudy Gobert can do what he does in terms of rim protection. If you're going to score well against Minnesota, you either need to be incredibly efficient from three or shoot a lot of mid-range jumpers, because they will let you shoot some of these long twos. They'll let you get to some of the in-between areas because they're going to let Rudy Gobert just be the guy protecting at the rim. The reason that's interesting is because the Suns have extremely high volume and efficiency from the mid-range. That is what they want to do. They want to isolate in the mid-post with Kevin Durant. They want to put Devin Booker in ball screens, attacking, trying to get his defender in jail and shoot from the mid-range. They want to drive and kick and have guys close out, and they're okay with guys shooting some medium to long twos. They're okay with exactly what Minnesota encourages teams to do, and they're very good at it. So especially early on in the series, if Phoenix shoots the ball well from the spots on the floor that they have been good at all year long, which is these mid-range jumpers, getting in the lane, some of these little floaters, I'm interested to see if that forces an early adjustment from Minnesota. I could easily see this be a situation where game one, game two, Phoenix scores the ball really well. Maybe they steal a game in Minnesota, and it causes some of the philosophy to shift a little bit for the Timberwolves, because as good of a regular season as they've had, we know that this is a team that, can have some issues at times in terms of guarding in the mid-range, and Cat has certainly had some weird situations in the playoffs before. Certainly not someone I trust a ton in the postseason. Gobert's had issues in the playoffs in the past as well. And this has played out throughout the regular season. The Suns are 3-0 against Minnesota this year. Yes, Anthony Edwards didn't play in one of those games, and you never really can count too much on regular season records carrying over directly to a postseason series. But I'd have to imagine that amongst the teams near the bottom of the conference, Phoenix is not a team that Minnesota wanted to play. One of the main reasons, by the way, that Phoenix was so good against the Timberwolves this season is because Anthony Edwards has not played well against them. Granted, it's only 2 games, but the shooting numbers are terrible. He looks uncomfortable. He doesn't look like he has a good feel for what Frank Vogel and this coaching staff likes to do defensively. And Minnesota can't win this series with him playing the way that he has against Phoenix so far this season. They're obviously very talented, and they can guard, and they've done a lot of really good things during the regular season. But this matchup reminds me just a little bit of Memphis Lakers last year, where it's like a high seed versus a low seed, but there's definitely some fear going into the series of what it could look like. Now, obviously, injuries and stuff had a lot to do with the Memphis stuff, but there's definitely this air of caution and a little bit of nerves, I think, around what Minnesota could potentially look like in the first round, and these interesting contrasts and styles, right? Like, both of these teams are low volume from three-point range. They're bottom 10 in three-point attempts per game. They shoot decently well from there, especially Minnesota, but the Timberwolves have the best defense in the league. Phoenix has a top half of the league defense, a top 10 offense, maybe a little bit more balanced in that area. And I still think Minnesota has more margin for error on a game-to-game basis because their floor is so much higher because of how good they are defensively, the size they have. They're going to rebound well. They're going to guard well. And certainly shooting-wise, like if Ant has an off game or they don't shoot super well from three, they have more margin for error, I think, than Minnesota does. But if there's a significant gap in shooting efficiency, especially for the mid-range and from three, Phoenix absolutely can win this series. They are, you could argue, built to win this series, to play well against the way that Minnesota likes to guard. And I'm anticipating this being a closer series than most people expect. Karl-Anthony Towns in a postseason environment makes me very nervous from a decision-making perspective. We've seen him struggle with fouls in the past as well. And we need a great Anthony Edwards performance. And I mean, I'm confident in Ant. He's an incredible player, one of my favorite guys to watch in the league. But just strictly based off the games that he's played against Phoenix this year, I'm a little bit nervous to see if he can figure out exactly the way that Phoenix wants to guard him. If the Suns stars play well. If Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, who's been really good over the last little bit here towards the end of the year, Kevin Durant, of course, they got Nurkic to deal with Gobert. If those guys play well, they've got a chance in the series. What I'm imagining is going to happen is Phoenix is going to come out a little bit hot in the series. Maybe they steal game 1 or game 2. Probably going to be 2-2 coming back in game 6. I feel like eventually the size and the length of Minnesota is going to overwhelm Phoenix. And they're going to have moments where, Kevin Durant's played 42 minutes in the game and he's had to play the 4 and he's had to deal with whether it be Towns or Gobert. I mean, Durant has to take on a lot of the rebounding load for Phoenix, especially if Nurkic isn't out there. And just over the course of the series, Minnesota's going to grind them down a little bit with that size, and they're going to have some success on the offensive glass. They're going to just really, really bother some of these attempts at the rim, and Phoenix is going to have to shoot well from the mid-range and from 3. And I think over the course of the series, I would count on Minnesota's size, their physicality, their defense, their length to really come through for them. Strictly from a personnel standpoint, I just think they're a little bit better. I'm going to pick Minnesota in 7 in this series, but I'm not overwhelmingly confident about it. I'm excited about the series because it's just it's a perfect mix of the quote-unquote underdog in the series having a lot of confidence against this team in the regular season, playing the way that you should want to play against Minnesota. And I don't think Phoenix is afraid of them. I think Phoenix views themselves as one of the better teams in the conference. And I think, honestly, this should be seen as kind of a toss-up matchup, despite the seeding difference, but despite the regular season record difference. And I really like Minnesota. I think Minnesota has a great chance to make the conference finals this year. But Phoenix is kind of a worst-case scenario matchup for them in the first round. We've seen issues in the past in terms of how Gobert guards. Maybe they try and get him into some switches if they change up how they play later in the series. That's not typically what Minnesota does, but if they're getting killed in the mid-range, they might have to make some changes. Maybe we see less Gobert, more Towns, more spacing from Minnesota. I think it's realistic to expect that the Timberwolves team that we see by the end of the series is completely different than the one that we see at the beginning of the series, just because of how difficult this matchup can be for them. They're going to have to punish Phoenix with their size. They're going to have to punish them on the glass because, again, assuming the Stars play well, we have no reason to believe that they won't. This is going to be a very, very tough matchup for them to be able to guard as well as they have all season long. So we will see exactly how it works out. But like I said, I'm incredibly intrigued by this matchup specifically. I'm looking at some of the other matchups as well in the postseason, trying to figure out what other series I want to cover as we lead up to the playoffs. I'll be talking about play-in stuff, of course, recapping those games after they happen. But let me know down in the comments what other playoff series you want to see me break down and talk about, because I think, especially in this postseason, there are a ton of really interesting matchups, even teams coming out of the play-in that I could see giving some of the higher seeded teams some issues. Let me know down in the comment section below what other series you guys would like for me to cover. And just so you know, Timberwolves fans, I'm not hating on you by saying that Phoenix is going to take this to 7 games. I still really like the team. I think they have a fantastic matchup against some of the better teams in the conference, like Oklahoma City and like Denver. I just think that this is a really, really tough draw for them. If they get through this one, they probably have a decent chance to make a good run. But a first-round playoff exit for Minnesota is definitely a possibility. It's not me hating. It's just where I'm at right now, but I cannot wait to see how the series plays out.